Okay, at this point, we are ahead of schedule, but we're going to jump right into the Q&A panel because, I mean, no one ever complained about being ahead of schedule. So I would like to invite the speakers to come on up and take a seat. Thank you. All right, so we also have some questions from the webinar, but if at any point you guys have a question for anyone who spoke this evening, you're welcome to just raise your hand or stand up, shout out your question, and then I'll repeat it into the microphone so everyone can hear, and then we can get it for the webinar as well. Okay, did anybody have a question they want to start off with? So the question is for Hannah, and the question is, at what point was the process automated? Because 20,000 SCSs is a lot to get through, so at what point did her team automate that process?
Sure. So first I should say that the 9-week, that was just a sampling graph that the client was looking for data from that specific period of time. This project took probably about 8 months to complete. So when you're authoring an SCS and SAP, the actual app, in theory, if everything works correctly, it's at the click of a button, all your data is there, everything is loaded, you tell it where to publish, and it'll go. That doesn't usually happen, ever. So the actual act of authoring is automated, but a lot of the physical work that we do in the system is checking and double checking, make sure everything is lined up correctly so that when we do click the button, it goes off without a hitch.
All right, any other questions right away? Okay, I'm going to jump into a couple from the webinar. This one is for Steve. Is the PMN withdrawal rate higher since LCSA?
I think it was just higher in the initial batch. Since they did the initial implementation, it's really kind of more normalized. I think it was really just the implementation of the TSCA rules there was a lot of carryover of PMNs that were, a lot of people rushed to get them in before the TSCA rules went into effect, but then they got sort of caught in this period where EPA applied the new rules even to existing PMNs in the process, so a lot of people wanted to withdraw them because they knew they wouldn't meet the need.
Okay, this question is for Scott. Are risk assessments required for PMNs or REACH submissions? And just be sure to talk right into the microphone so we can record you. Thank you.
They're not strictly required for PMNs, but it's kind of like what Steve said. Helpful to guide the EPA, and so if you think there might be problems, maybe you want to throw something in there. It doesn't have to be the big process, but for REACH, it kind of depends on how much product you're selling. Above a certain level, you need those screening.
All right, thank you. Okay, another question for Steve. When does the reset rule need to be completed?
So inventory reset. Right now, inventory reset is actually in process. So manufacturers are actually required by February, I think it's February 7th, to have their inventories reset. And after that, they gave processors another, I think days, but basically it's October, beginning of October, when processors can finish up. Now, interesting part of the way they wrote the rule is that they consider processors and manufacturers at the same time. So if you're a processor, i.e. a formulator, there's nothing that says you can't nominate now, just like a manufacturer would. So the process is relatively straightforward in CDX. So if they allow you to do it, and there isn't any reason not to do it, other than you save yourself a lot of effort as a processor by waiting until the manufacturers are done. And of course, EPA, being a government agency, has to cost justify everything, so that's why they phase in periods.
Great. This is actually a follow-up question for you as well. Who exactly needs to notify substances under the inventory reset rule?
Okay. So if you manufacture a substance, even if you're not the original PMN filer, if you manufacture a substance, you can notify it. There'll probably be more notifiers for each substance than just one. EPA will sort that part out. That's not really their concern. They didn't really have a lot of data requirements for this because, as we said in the presentation, the U.S. Congress put a lot of time requirements in place for EPA to get this done on a specific timeline. So as they got closer to their implementation deadline, they started cutting out requirements to make the deadline, to make this notification easy. So manufacturers, if you manufacture it, yes. If you're a processor, meaning formulator, blender, anything like that, that period is under the processor period from February to October.
All right, thank you. Any questions from the audience? All right, this question is for Hannah, and he is asking, how did you validate your CAS numbers when you were entering them into the SAP system?
Yeah, typically we would review the data that's in SAP, and then we would compare it with data. At the time our client was really into Arial, so we would use resources in Arial to back up the information to make sure it was in SAP correctly. The issues that we had come across, why we were validating the CAS numbers, was because the supplier, the previous owner of that product line, the information was not, I don't want to say it wasn't accurate, but it wasn't up to date and it didn't really fit the format of SAP, so things got lost in translation. But to answer your question, in this case we did use Arial and we verified information there. We used a few other databases as well. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but it was backed up with third-party data.
Great. All right, any additional questions from the audience? Okay, I do have one more from the webinar, and this one is for Hannah as well. This project sounds great. How would you apply a project like this for a smaller scale project? What if somebody only had 1,000 SDSs or a few hundred SDSs?
Sure, that's actually a really good question. We do projects like that as well. And a few things can happen differently. We can either have the same amount of staff working on it and your project finishes a little bit quicker, or we have fewer staff working on it and it just takes a little bit longer. That kind of depends what you're looking for and what resources that you're willing to expend, basically.
Great.
Right. Also, if you have a few hundred SDSs and you do have, excuse me, a system in place, it will certainly be a little easier to author those few hundred SDSs in Works or SAP or whatever you're using, as opposed to if you don't have one. If you don't have one, we'll probably have to take them in-house to author them in our system, which will take a little bit longer.
All right. Thanks, Hannah. Any other questions? All right. Sounds good. Well, we are going to wrap up a little bit early. They'll all be here for a little bit. If you have a question that you want to ask personally and not in front of everyone, you're welcome to. But otherwise, I just want to say thank you all so much for being here tonight. We hope you enjoyed yourself and you learned some valuable information. Again, thank you for sharing with us tonight, and we appreciate it. Thank you for coming.